All right, so this time we're diving into the world of penis enlargement exercises.
Definitely a topic with a lot of whispers around it.
We got sent this guide, and it seems like you're really interested in those natural methods for...
Yeah, enhancing things, so to speak.
And this guide, it doesn't beat around the bush, does it? It jumps right into the anxieties guys might have about size, right there on page 1.
It's interesting how it takes those feelings, those insecurities, and tries to connect them back to our evolutionary past.
You mean, like, even if we aren't really thinking about having a huge family these days, those instincts are still somewhere in our minds?
That's the idea it's putting forward, yeah. Those primal instincts could still be affecting how men see themselves today. It's a pretty clever way to validate those feelings.
Instead of just saying, get over it, it's like it's saying, hey, these feelings are deeply rooted, but...
But they don't have to rule your life.
Really?
Which is a good message, because then it goes on to say that in reality, having a smaller penis doesn't actually prevent you from having a fulfilling life.
Yeah. It even says straight out, size doesn't limit your ability to have relationships, have a family.
Or even just be happy. It's refreshing, honestly, to see a guide address that head on. So many just avoid those deeper issues.
By being upfront about it, it feels like it's setting a more realistic tone. Like, let's be honest with ourselves first.
Right. It's like the guide is saying, look, size isn't everything, which can be a tough pill to swallow.
But then it follows up with confidence. That's key.
Exactly. And how does it try to build that confidence? By diving right into male anatomy.
Anatomy 101, but with a very specific focus.
I chuckle. Well, yeah. It gets pretty detailed, especially when it talks about the corpus cavernosum.
Which, just to remind everyone, are those,
They're like chambers inside the penis.
And why are those important again?
Because those chambers, the corpus cavernosum, they're what fill up with blood during an erection.
Right. So the guide is saying that these exercises, they're actually targeting those tissues specifically.
That's the claim. It suggests these exercises can make them expand over time and therefore change the size.
Like taking your bicep to the gym for a good workout.
Except in this case, it's your corpus cavernosum getting the workout.
Right. And speaking of workouts, this guide also really emphasizes the PC muscle, which is...
The one you use if you ever need to stop peeing suddenly.
Right, that's the one. I actually remember learning about those in yoga.
It's saying that a strong PC muscle, it's not just about potential size gains, but it can also help with stronger erections and even help with things like premature ejaculation.
So it's kind of like laying the groundwork before,
Before you start building the house, you need a solid foundation.
Exactly. But before we get into the how-to of all of it, the guide takes this interesting detour into the land of...
The land of what women really want.
That's the one.
It's trying to clear up some of those, let's call them myths and assumptions that often surround this topic.
Like that whole thing about size being all that matters?
Well, it does point out that the average vagina is only about 3 inches long.
And that it's designed to, stretch.
It does make you think twice about whether bigger is always better, doesn't it?
It's like the guide is trying to reassure guys who might be worried that they don't, measure up, so to speak.
And it goes a step further, even providing this whole list of qualities that women find attractive. And surprise, surprise, most of them aren't about physical attributes.
It's really interesting how it shifts the conversation away from just size to a more well-rounded view of what makes for good sex.
It's about the skills, the technique, the emotional connection.
So we've got the anatomy lesson down, a little reassurance about size.
And a peek into what your partner might actually be looking for.
All right, so are we ready to unpack some of these exercises? I'm particularly curious about dry milking and wet milking.
Light chuckle.
Yeah.
Let's see what those intriguing terms are all about.
All right, so we're about to unpack these exercise terms, starting with dry milking and wet milking.
When I first saw those, I have to admit, those names definitely caught my eye.
I know, right? They sound like something you'd find in a, very different kind of guide.
But when you actually get into it, the techniques themselves are, maybe not as exciting as the names make them sound.
So no actual milking involved?
Not quite, no. Wet milking, for instance, involves putting some lubricant on and then using your hand to basically massage and pull.
Okay, so it's more about, promoting blood flow down there.
That's the idea, yeah. And the hope is that over time, that increased blood flow might encourage those tissues, in the corpus cavernosum.
To expand and theoretically lead to an increase in size.
You got it. The guide really stresses using enough lubrication, though. Minimize friction, minimize the risk of any injuries.
Makes sense. Safety first, especially in such a, shall I say, sensitive area. The guide even mentions potential side effects, things like minor bruising. They're upfront about that.
It even suggests that people listen to their bodies. If something hurts, take a break, don't overdo it.
It's all about managing expectations, right?
Exactly. It's not a quick fix. It's something you have to commit to. And the guide even lays out this whole schedule, 5 days a week, 30 minutes a day.
Wow, that's dedication. But I guess it makes sense. We are talking about a kind of stretching, right?
That's their argument. And just like if you're trying to get more flexible, it takes time, it takes consistency.
You're not going to become a contortionist overnight, right?
Exactly. And just like with regular stretching, this guide stresses the importance of warming up beforehand. In this case, they recommend something called, get this, hot wraps.
Okay, before we dive into the hot wraps, I got to ask about another term, jelqing.
That one sounds a little intimidating, doesn't it? Like some ancient practice.
It does sound a bit like something out of a medieval torture chamber, doesn't it?
But I promise, it's much tamer than it sounds. Jelqing is basically another technique that focuses on blood flow, and it involves.
Okay, and then we have pulling and slapping, which sounds even more intense. Are we doing some kind of penis-based martial art now?
Not exactly. Pulling and slapping is actually considered a more advanced technique in this guide, something they recommend trying only after you've built up some strength and flexibility through the other exercises.
So if you're new to all of this, don't just jump right into pulling and slapping. Got it.
Exactly. They really hammer home that you need a good foundation first.
So it's like a step-by-step program.
That's one way to put it, yeah. Start with the PC muscle exercises, move on to things like milking and jelqing, and then maybe, if you're feeling adventurous and you've mastered the basics,
You can graduate to pulling and slapping like you're earning your black belt in penis enlargement.
something like that.
Yeah.
But it's not just about these hands-on techniques. This guide goes beyond that. It emphasizes that, penis health, it's part of your overall health. It's all connected.
Right, like you can't just focus on one part of your body and neglect everything else.
Exactly. It talks about things like diet, making sure you're eating healthy, getting enough exercise.
Cardio too, right, getting that blood pumping.
Exactly. The guide says all that can improve circulation, not just to, certain areas, but to your whole body, which is good for your overall well-being.
They even talk about stress and sleep, which I can see how those would play a role.
Absolutely. It's refreshing to see a guide that's not just pushing these exercises in isolation, but also saying, hey, take care of yourself as a whole. It all matters.
Because at the end of the day, it's not just about size, it's about feeling good inside and out. Now, we've covered what all these techniques, these interesting terms, but the big question is, do they actually work?
Ah, yes. The million-dollar question, or perhaps, given the topic, the several inches question.
So we've talked about the techniques, all those exercises with the creative names, but now the real question is, do they actually work?
That's what everyone wants to know, right? And this guide, I'll give credit, it acknowledges that there's skepticism out there.
It's not like you can just go to the gym and work out your,
Right, it's not like building a bicep.
Exactly. So what's the guy's argument then? How can these techniques actually make a difference?
They're saying that by doing these exercises consistently, the stretching, the increased blood flow, it might, and that's the key word, it might encourage those tissues in the penis to expand over time.
Okay, so it's like if you stretch regularly, you can become more flexible. You might even be able to lengthen your ligaments a bit.
That's the idea they're going for.
But that's a little iffy, right? Like we want to be fair to the guide, but we got to be honest with our listeners too. What does the actual science say about all of this?
Well, the research is, to put it lightly, mixed.
Mixed meaning.
Meaning some small studies show a modest increase in either length or girth from certain techniques, but then other studies show basically no change at all.
So not exactly a glowing endorsement from the scientific community.
Not really. And that's really important for anyone listening to keep in mind. If you're considering these exercises, go in with realistic expectations.
Don't expect miracles, basically.
Exactly. Plus, the guide itself even mentions that if these techniques aren't done right, there's a risk of injury.
Which brings us back to that point. If you're seriously thinking about trying any of this, talk to a doctor first. Always good to get a professional opinion.
Absolutely. They can help you weigh the potential risks and benefits. They might even be able to guide you on the proper techniques.
Safety first. But one thing that surprised me about this guide is it doesn't just focus on size. It talks about other stuff, too.
Right. Premature ejaculation, for example.
They have a whole section on that.
Yeah, they suggest different exercises, self-control techniques, even mention some topical creams that might help.
It's like they're trying to cover all the bases, make it a complete men's health resource.
And here's the thing, even when it branches out into those other areas, it still comes back to that holistic health message. They emphasize the importance of diet, exercise, stress management, all that good stuff.
Because you can't just focus on one part of your body and ignore everything
It
else.
all ties together.
Well, there you have it, our deep dive into the world of penis enlargement exercises. We've gone through the claims, broken down the techniques, even gotten a little bit technical with the anatomy,
I've tried to give you the full picture, the good, the bad, and the unproven.
because knowledge is power, right? The more you know, the better equipped you are to make informed decisions about your own body.
Couldn't agree more.
So hopefully this has given everyone listening a better understanding of this topic. And hey, maybe it's even sparked some interesting conversations. And until next time, keep those questions coming. We'll be back to dive into another topic soon.